Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am really pleased to be joined by my friend Eli Schwartz, who I think we were trying to figure out. I think we probably first crossed paths in your SurveyMonkey days and stayed in touch ever since then. And I've been following, obviously, a lot of your writing and thinking. And there's been a lot of parallels I've seen between things that you've been thinking about, things that we've been thinking about. And I have your book right here.
Thanks.
So folks should check that out as well. It's product-led SEO. Eli's made a name for inventing this terminology. Did you invent the terminology? I'm going to give you credit for inventing the terminology of product-led SEO. And I hope you did. And that suddenly this popularizing this concept, which has been super powerful, I think, well, certainly in your work, and very influential for many other folks, myself included. And we're going to have a kind of wide-ranging conversation today. All kinds of things, no doubt, from AI, how dead SEO is or isn't, and hopefully some tactical tidbits and things that people can take away as well. So Eli, thank you for joining us.
Such an honor to be here. It's so good to see you again.
It's been too long. So why don't we get right into that kind of pointy end right from the get-go? How dead is SEO?
I think SEO is dead if you have like this narrow focus of what SEO is, which is, I don't know, optimizing content and stuffing keywords in there and buying links and manipulating algorithms. But if you really bring SEO back to what it's supposed to be, which is acquiring users from a pull search channel. So again, the way, if you think about what users are trying to do, they're pulling information, they're proactively choosing to find something. If that's what an SEO channel is, it will never, ever die, because I don't think we'll ever be in a world where you are fed information. You wake up in the morning and your AI alarm clock tells you what you should be doing during the day, and you don't make decisions about your life. I think we're always going to be in a world where, hopefully, I don't want to live in that world where we're not, where you make your own decisions, and as a human, you navigate things and you request information. So if you're requesting information, that's what search is. So search is that medium that brings you the information. So from that standpoint, search is not 10 blue links, 7 blue links, 3 blue links on Google, or I don't know, one answer on a Siri or a Google Home Assistant. It's those platforms. So SEO might be LLM optimization. SEO might be Google Home Assistant optimization. SEO might be Tesla navigation optimization. So if we, as SEO, we are that medium that helps websites optimize themselves, not just websites, actually products and services and people, optimize themselves for that pulling of information, and SEO needs to adapt. So from a narrow focus, if SEO is what it is today, it's dead, because those things don't matter anymore. I mean, you and I have been doing this for a long time. Like when I first started doing SEO, I did a lot of keyword stuffing, and that is absolutely unnecessary today when the keyword is not a thing. Like you can type a keyword and then the LLM, whether it's Google or another one, can say, okay, that's the word you typed, but I know you meant something else, and it is not connected to the words you typed. So SEO is changing, and that's a good thing.
I definitely agree with that. I think that there's some really interesting stuff that you said in there about not only there's a bundling of this channel with other things. Because some of the things that you do when you're in that pull mode, when you're curious about something, you're trying to find out whether it be an answer or whether it be where to shop, or commercial type search. There's other things you also do that really aren't searches, and I think some of that has always happened on Google. And actually, it was some of the first stuff to fall to the one box or whatever. You do a basic sum, a basic addition, and Google gives you the answer. You weren't really searching for what the answer to 100,000 divided by 7 was exactly. It wasn't really ever a search. It was a calculation. And there are similar things. We went through this in the voice search, early voice search era, when you say things like, I'm not going to say it because if anybody's listening on a speaker, it'll set it off in their house. But you say the trigger word.
That sounds fun.
and then you ask to set an alarm or a timer, and that's not a search, right? You're not really searching for anything. And I think with LLMs, we're just getting even further down that path of some of those things are searches, and some of those things in the same channel or in the same box, in the same interface, maybe aren't.
Well, absolutely. And I think if we understand this from purely a commercial standpoint, being able to make those requests about set an alarm is the reason Google does that is because they're trying to condition you and train you to go to that device for everything. And Amazon has had fits and starts with this, and I don't know how successful they truly are at the shopping angle of this because they don't really discuss it. They talk about how
I
many people
assume
have.
not, because they've basically kind of cut all their investment in the Alexa product.
Yeah, but I have the devices and it's constantly trying to get me to buy stuff, but they've never broken out how many people like make a voice search
Actually
to
do
buy
that.
something. But that was the point. The reason they invested all that in there is because they wanted to go and tell you to like play a game with your Alexa device. And then they wanted you to be like, order me toilet paper. So like that was the whole point. And I think Google is significantly more successful because they provide information. So I have the Google Assistants all over my house. So being able to like set alarms and ask it things and find out the weather conditions me to continuously ask it for information, which of course gives them all sorts of information about who I am and what I'm buying and what I'm thinking. And then they build more personalization. But that's the point of that. And again, we have to expand well beyond Google because once there are more interfaces in cars that have these things beyond just Teslas and the few smart cars out there, that also becomes another search interface and to optimize against. Right? So like, yes, you'll get in your car and say, navigate me to something, but that is all. You could also say like, where should I go eat? Or should I drive to this Home Depot or should I go to that Lowe's? Like those all become searches. And that's where, again, we're not in that world, but you could get so much more information of like, did you know that like the hammer is on sale at Lowe's today? And now you're changing your direction. So that's all search. And that's, again, not the way SEO thinks of themselves. SEO always thought of themselves as like, well, I'm the SEO manager for Lowe's. I'm going to optimize my page so I get more searches for hammers rather than this broader environment of how do I position myself as like all the things, and this is, as a marketer, I love this even more, all the reasons you should shop at Lowe's, which is all the information that comes back at an LLM. When you say, where should I buy a hammer? The LLM will now answer the question and say, well, if you go to Lowe's, you get this level of service, you wait in line, there's more parking. But if you buy it at Amazon, you can return it, but then you have to go to Whole Foods to return it. Like all that information now comes back. So if you're the SEO manager for Lowe's, you need to do a lot more than, stuff the word hammer on the page.
Yeah, for sure. And there's something really interesting in that part, I think, about a simple query can mean so many different things, not just depending on what we might have called context historically, but based on that much, much broader context, and some of which they'll know about you, whether it's Google or whether it's your favorite LLM, dedicated LLM. But there are some things that they might ask a follow-up question. In the same way that if I said to you, hey, I'm coming to your city, where should I go for breakfast? You might ask me a question before you answer that. Like, are you taking someone? Is it a business thing? Where in the city are you going? What kind of food are you in the mood for? Like there's going to be a lot more that isn't just a simple, well, here's the 5 places that I always go kind of interface to those questions.
I love that. I love that you brought that up because ChatGPT now does this follow-up question thing,
Especially with deep research.
Yes, which helps you get to this better place. So, and actually we should discuss this right now and then we'll go back into this, which is so I'm a consultant and I get leads where people need help with improving their search. So many of my leads over the last 2 years are panicked. Like big brands are like, we're down 60%. We don't know what happened. And I know what happened. They're just thinking of search from, 5 years ago and search has all changed. So going back into what we were just talking about, so that whole idea of like ChatGPT and Google does the exact same thing and Perplexity and Claude, they're all going to do the exact same thing, which is ask you follow-up questions to get better at what you're trying to accomplish. So now if you're this, 2020 version of SEO, you're like, oh my God, I can't optimize for that anymore. But if you're this 2025, 2026 version of SEOs, well, the engine is trying to better understand who that user is. So who is that user? So what you're talking about with like where to eat, you might be a breakfast place, but that is very, very broad. You really want to target like what kind of breakfast, what kind of diet, what kind of foods, what kind of pricing, what kind of location, all of those things that the engine's going to follow up. And that's your buyer. That's your user. So as an SEO, your job is to best optimize for that. So that might be, well, again, today's version of SEO, and I actually think most restaurants shouldn't really even have a web page because that's not how we buy food. We don't go to web pages and then go to places. We go to Google Maps or we go to DoorDash or we walk down the street. So web is not necessarily the place they should be spending $5,000 a month. But that aside, if you are building out your web presence, you would want to include all that information that would be requested in follow-ups, again, by a person. And this is what I love about AI. AI is trying to emulate that person. Your friend is saying, where do you want to eat? Oh, what do you feel like? Do you want to wait in line? Are you very hungry right now? Do you want greasy? Do you want to sit down? Do you want candles on the table? All those follow-up questions, the engine's going to ask those same follow-up questions. So put that information in your web page. So like that is, you're now be able to be found for like, this is our general pricing. A lot of times, restaurants might want to hide their pricing, but if you want to be found for people who are looking for specific pricing, you need to have that information.
I want to just pop back up to something you said about some of those lead to a company. We're not in the consulting game anymore. If folks are looking for that consulting advice, they should
definitely reach out to me. No, I appreciate it.
But there's something you said that was interesting about folks who are panicking because their traffic has dropped or whatever. There's a few spaces, I think, where the actual LLM usage is the new channels, all these different like changing user behavior has radically shifted, right? Stack Overflow is probably one of the handful who are genuinely at that leading edge of how user behavior has affected them, because developers are using command line tools, smart IDEs, et cetera, Cursor, whatever it might be. There's a lot of searches there that are, well, let's not get into that. That's a different rabbit hole. The point I wanted to make was, if you're talking to many brands, whether it's e-commerce, whether it's SaaS, whether it's whatever it might be, kind of classic businesses that have done very well in search, and they're down 60%, that is not because people are using LLMs and not using Google anymore. And I don't think this is what you're saying, but I think it's kind of important for folks to hear and understand. There's been a few case studies recently, and we've all seen the viral examples of people using cherry-picked external data to say, look, this business is down X% year over year because of how people are changing how they're searching. People are changing how they're searching, but not that radically. And most of those folks who are down, that traffic is just going somewhere else. Those people are still doing those same searches on Google. It's just someone else is winning it. And there's definitely and so I think I wanted to pull it out because I think it's what you meant, is when people are doing that kind of 2020 SEO, they're just doing bad SEO. It's not like their market has shifted to ChatGPT overnight.
Yes. And before we started recording, I told you I wasn't going to name names, but I want to name a name. I was recently at a conference, and I attended this panel, and it was called like Beyond, what do we do beyond Google? And on this panel were four media companies who are like brands that everyone would recognize. And they were there complaining about how all their search traffic is down 80% and Google stole their traffic. So I'm not going to name all the names, but I'm going to name one name. And one name is the New York Times. So the head of business for the New York Times was complaining about how they lost all this traffic to Wirecutter and Google's terrible. And now they just have to buy traffic to Wirecutter. And I thought that was absolutely pathetic. And I went over to speak to that person afterwards, but she wasn't responsible for their traffic being down. She was just sharing a perspective. So the reason I thought it was pathetic is because the search volume for the things that Wirecutter talks about is up, significantly up. So like, what are the best blenders to buy? Traffic's up. What are the best, should you buy Windows computer or a MacBook? Traffic is up. So traffic is up for all those verticals. And Wirecutter losing traffic and throwing up their hands and saying, oh, Google is evil because they took away all our traffic. They have taken that New York Times brand and saying, we're not going to lean into it anymore and we're going to complain about Google. And instead, we're going to give up that traffic to other brands. They may be small affiliates. They may be massive companies like CNET. But either way, they're giving up that traffic because they're refusing to lean in to being the New York Times. And I don't know, and the reason I don't usually like to name names is because I don't want to get any SEO teams in trouble, but I don't think they're actually working with, they don't have an internal SEO team. I think they work with agencies, so it's a totally different question. They believe that they're doing the right SEO and Google has stolen it from them. They're not doing the right SEO because they're not getting the traffic. They are the New York Times. There is something that they should be doing that would help them to be both the New York Times and be what Google wants. And that brand value of being Wirecutter and being the New York Times, they should be capturing more of that increase in traffic. So there is that old way of doing SEO. I think they have not changed. They're still, throwing keywords in. They still look like they're doing site reputation abuse, and they're not. They are absolutely not a site doing site reputation abuse. There were other sites up on that panel that were doing site reputation abuse where they were just like writing terrible affiliate posts. The New York Times, I have used Wirecutter. I think they are a fantastic place to get buying information, and them complaining about losing traffic is because they're not doing the SEO that they should be doing.
Fascinating. I would have loved to have seen that panel. I think I don't want to downplay, there's definitely been some like smaller publishers, especially like some indie bloggers and stuff where there's been some serious turbulence. And I think I haven't dug deep personally into some of those cases. I think regardless of the correctness of Google or its strategy, there's certainly been a disregard for, well, one day they say this website is the absolute perfect search result for all of these queries, and people are building their small businesses around it, not the New York Times, who can afford the consultants and can afford everything else. And then that's kind of being yanked around, and like maybe that's correct, but it's certainly showing any instability and unpredictability in the channel. I think is fundamentally long term bad for Google, because it does push people towards the paid channels, like you were saying. Like folks are like, well, this just becomes pay to play, and so I'd call that out as a slightly different thing. But the point you're making there is still really interesting, that you hear, Google screwed us over. You hear, Google's dead. Google's done for. ChatGPT is everything, which is just not supported by the data. And one of the things that I've been talking a lot about recently is, I'm sure folks are getting pressure from you must hear this as well, from their marketing directors, their CMOs, their VP, for their AI discoverability strategy. And my argument is that starts with Google. Google is 90 something % of your AI powered traffic right now. And I think that's also getting missed in some of the zero click stuff, some of those all the search interface changes. Is I'm inclined to actually believe some of the stuff that Sundar and some of the other folks over there have said around how they actually see more clicks out in AI overview enhanced searches. I don't think it's quite as simple as there are more clicks on the AI overview. I think it's partly that people do more searches, but the total number of clicks out from Google is up year over year, is the other stat that I believe, I'm inclined to believe from all the data that we've seen.
Yeah, I think people are searching more. I think that's what it comes down to. So then it's just the pie is so much bigger. I want to make sure, I don't like to defend Google, but I will defend Google on this helpful content and all the things that they're doing, and which is the reason that sites get in trouble when they seem to be good sites, and Google even calls them out as being good sites, is because Google's an algorithm. It's just like if else rules. And it's going to have false positives and it's going to have false negatives. And that's the advantage to AI. So the feedback loop on algorithms, I was a victim, 14 years ago, of Google's Panda update, which taught me everything I wanted to know about SEO. And I'd done all the wrong SEO up to that point, and it changed my whole viewpoint in SEO. So the company I was working for, we lost 60% of traffic, in one morning, and we deserved it. We did all the wrong things, but we deserved it. But we followed the rules that Google had given to that point, and then Google changed the rules. And so there were a lot of false positives, which were sites that got hit by Google's update. They didn't necessarily deserve it. And what was interesting is when Google launched the Panda update, and this is in 2011, when Google launched the Panda update, they were targeting demand media. I don't know for anybody that hasn't been on the internet that long, it was a company that was specifically created to get SEO traffic. They had the articles that Google made fun of was how to boil water. And they would get SEO traffic and they monetize it with Google AdSense. So when they launched the Panda update, they did not actually hit demand media. It missed. And that's because of an algorithm. They wrote a bunch of rules and this is what it should look for, and it didn't. It didn't find it. And Google had to update Panda weeks later, and then they finally got demand media, and they got even more sites that didn't deserve it. Because again, these are product updates, these are algorithm updates, and they're doing the best they can. Shifting to AI, the reason why AI is so much better is it has an immediate feedback loop. So if you go and you type an AI response and say, what we're talking about, where to eat, right? So like, give me the best places to go eat right now in Upper West Side. And then the AI, whatever platform it is, gives you 3 ideas. And you say, no, I don't like any of those 3 ideas because they're too expensive or the lines are too long. You have just trained the AI. So Google does things, and then everyone's like, oh, look how bad Google is. Look at all these sites. Google said it's unhelpful content, but it's truly helpful. Let's say it's the New York Times. Google said, and I don't know why the New York Times has less traffic, but Google says the Wirecutter's now it's unhelpful content. So Google, I mean, I know a lot of Googlers. Googlers might look at this and be like, oh, look, we missed. Yeah, we really shouldn't have hit Wirecutter, but there's no immediate button to go and adjust that.
Try and shift the dials back, right?
Yeah, they can't do that. So what they do is they do what big companies do. They have meetings, they discuss, they debug, and then they propose a solution. And then weeks later they try again, and maybe it misses, maybe it hits. AI again, they write the rules and then the rules train themselves. So that's the future, and that's why like AI search is better because like if you don't like it, you tell it what you didn't like, and it gives you better responses.
I mean, yes. And there's also something very interesting in the fact, I think, that it's become less interpretable and less explainable, even to the folks who work on it, right? And I think actually Panda was probably the first instance I remember of that, because it was one of the early times where they were using whatever it was called back then, deep learning, and because they trained it on the quality rater questionnaire, right? So
it was that, but it was also basically Google Ads quality score. So it incorporated that of like click-through rate, like quality score, like whatever quality score looks at, like bounce rates and click-through rate, they put it onto SEO also.
But it was one of the first times, I think, that they'd admitted using that kind of deep learning type approach to incorporate all of these different signals in a way that wasn't literally if else, branching logic. And I remember because it was when Amit left. And when Amit Singhal left Google, was like 2016, it was kind of the big pivot to incorporating more of this stuff because I think he'd been quite against the idea of using the more machine learning, deep learning stuff in the core algorithm. And they'd used it in certain batch classifiers and certain elements, and they used it in some of the paid search areas. But I think when you think back to some of those like super long ago updates like Vince or the Florida or whatever, like those were literally changing the weights.
Yes,
as I understand it, like literally an engineer going, I think this 2.3 should be a 5.7, and they test it on their their local setup, and then they test it on a bigger setup, and they test it on a bigger setup, and it works. If a website is dropped, we couldn't see this, but they have a dashboard. Back in the Matt Cutts era, they would have had a dashboard. He could literally log in and kind of go, "Oh, yeah, I see. You had too many of this or too much." He would never tell you the answer necessarily, but he knows exactly why this score dropped. Therefore, that score is now weighted more highly, and so your site has dropped. They don't have that anymore, as I understand it, and I think correcting those things, if they don't self-correct in the way you just described, is it's more like psychology of the machines. They have to you become therapist for these LLMs, because you can't just say, I want the exact same LLM I had yesterday, but I want this website to be recommended, not that website. Like that's not a feature of how these things work. And totally. The fact that it's literally impossible to understand these things is, I think it's going to lead to some of the more interesting, what's that saying? May you live in interesting times, possibly a curse, possibly a, yes. But I certainly feel like we're going to live in some interesting times.
Yeah, it's like when the Google API leak, was it like a year ago when it came out? I wasn't so excited by it. I mean, I thought it was cool to like see some Google stuff, but like it was just things that Google measured. And I think, yes, the fact that Google looked at relevancy, yeah, I assumed that Google did a lot of that stuff, but you still couldn't reverse engineer it. No one could reverse engineer it. Even the Yandex leak that came out, I think Yandex was so much smarter than it's just a bunch of factors, but the machine taught itself. And I think Google's been doing that for a very long time. They were using machine learning. They were using AI. They were using, AI to understand intent. And they were using machine learning that like they didn't need actual algo updates to go and change the way results would come out. Versus again, the Matt Cutts days, like things were static and then there was an algo update and they would shift everything around. So, but I think moving forward, they're going to do a lot more of that. And that I don't know what to believe when it comes to like clicks on AI results, but it's possible that AI results will just be results and that will be immediate feedback. So whereas the regular, 1 through 10, like it's pretty static. And I think it's very frustrating for SEOs that are doing like the 2020 version of SEO and they're like looking at their rankings and they're like, look, I got 1 million new links from all domain authority 100 sites and your rankings don't change. And that's because like, that's not the way it's supposed to work. But there is immediate feedback in AI overviews that is not necessarily tied to the rankings, which again could be a lot more static.
There's something very. I think the freshness thing is one of those things that's going to be very interesting. There was a really interesting. In fact, anybody listening to this is probably going to be interested in the episode of Dwarkesh's podcast where Jeff Dean comes on with one of his colleagues whose name I forget. So for folks who don't know who Jeff Dean is, he's the Chuck Norris of Google. So internally at Google, they have all these memes about how the query server went down, but it turned out it was just Jeff Dean going on holiday, and in fact he'd been answering all the queries by hand. He's like this legendary engineer. I think he's like level 11 on a 1 to 10 scale of engineers, and he's now working on Google Brain or whatever they call the AI stuff. And he and his colleague were talking about this idea that they may get to a point where there are very much two distinct kinds of training that's going on. You have the kind of training that creates an intelligence, and you have the kind of training of that intelligence learning new facts. And you may not need to retrain the intelligence to update with the new facts. So I'm massively paraphrasing like an hour and a half long conversation, and people should definitely go and listen to the original thing. But one of the things I took away from it was this concept of, we don't, as humans, relearn language every time we want to learn a new concept. We don't retrain everything about how we speak and walk and talk and our like fundamental foundational stuff every time we want to even starting to learn a new language or something. We don't go back to those kind of building block foundations. But that's kind of how a lot of LLMs work right now, is that they don't always incorporate the latest, apart from when they go out to the web. The actual core model doesn't learn new facts. It is trained, and then they throw it away and they train a new one. I'm very much paraphrasing. But there's something kind of interesting about the idea that once these things get smart enough, you may get to a point of teaching the model new knowledge, not in a RAG, retrieval augmented stuff kind of way, but in a fundamental foundational, like this is actually going into the neurons, into the actual guts of the LLM. Anyway, we're way outside probably either our expertise, definitely my expertise. I want to go on to an adjacent topic, which we kind of touched on, which is the paid thing. And I've been hearing all kinds. I've been trying to spend more time with very senior marketers and leaders, particularly at e-commerce and retail businesses. This is like a big part of what we do at Searchpilot, is working with those folks. And I'm hearing all kinds of interesting stuff that I've never had as many conversations with folks like that about the intersection of paid and organic. Because I'm always curious when you get to that level where they're above the SEO team. So all of the channels report to them and they're accountable for the whole mix. And I've always been fascinated by the allocation of resources. You get 80%, maybe not 80%, you get 50, 60% of your traffic from organic search, but you spend 80% of your budget on paid. Mismatch has been true forever and people have always kind of railed against it. But I'm starting to see some interesting things, a couple of things, and then I'm interested in your comment and thoughts. One is a comment from someone, major retailer, saying, about predictability. And they said something like our paid search overspend last month, just the amount we spent more than budget, was bigger than our entire annual SEO budget. That was one thing that just to kind of put that in context. Another one, this was just we were at eTail last week. Someone said SEO is a dirty word in our organization. This was in various conversations, and one of the questions I asked was like, how does the CFO feel about it? And they were like, no, the CFO loves SEO. And that idea of that there is some mismatch in there. And then final one, just to prompt you to see if any of these things lead to interesting thoughts for you to expand on. The other thing is this idea of increasing inflation in cost per click, and the fact that folks are looking at this trend and saying, if the inflation in the costs is going to outstrip inflation in the value, then that's not sustainable. And this, as they're looking at this over the forward-looking 2 to 3 to 5 year horizon, a lot of these things are looking less sustainable. So I'm fascinated in what your experiences, what your conversations have looked like around any of that.
Yeah, I love this topic, and it's something I fell into accidentally while I was at SurveyMonkey, and it's something I rail against a lot, on LinkedIn and in my newsletter. I think most SEO people, whether it's consultants or managers or whoever is involved in SEO, are terrible salespeople for SEO. And they make SEO unintentionally opaque. And when people have to make budgeting decisions, they think of SEO as too opaque, and therefore they don't fund it because it's too much of a guess. And I can tell you that in my consulting, the one thing I always try to do in any sales pitch is make it not opaque. So in any pitch, I love when companies spend a lot of money on paid marketing, because then I talk to them about their CAC. I talk to them about their LTV. I talk to them about their ROI. And then I try to turn that into a conversation of like, well, this is what SEO might look like. And I don't do typical SEO. I'm doing more strategic SEO, obviously product-led SEO, where I'm requiring of them to make an investment into an SEO channel, which will have some sort of outcome. And I'll build this entire channel in their mind and in my mind of like, this is what it costs us. We're going to invest $1 million into this. But like thinking about the buyer and thinking about the funnel, what do we think we'll get out of this? And keeping in mind that SEO is more of a one-time investment into building this channel. Obviously, you have to maintain it, but think about all these inputs and then what's going to be the ROI on that spend based on the LTV of all the users that will come in the next few years from it. That's when it becomes more profitable. And that's the conversation we have. And a lot of times my conversations absolutely fail. And I'm like, there probably is no SEO buyer here and we shouldn't spend a lot of money. And what you're doing right now, which is, again, what most agencies sell into, is SEO is this audit, which has no ROI. SEO is like 10 pieces of content, which some will have ROI, some will not, but they actually never do that thinking of like, well, if I target this tail term, which is not in my funnel, that is a complete waste of money. If I target this term and I never rank on it, that's a complete waste of money. If I target this mid-funnel term, but I am dominant on it and I have a 50% conversion rate, why don't I do more of that? But actually, there's only 5 articles to write, and that's all I need to do for SEO. Skip SEO, go back to paid. So these are broader conversations, and I think many people in SEO don't sell it properly. And they think the best way to sell it is to make it look like smoke and mirrors, because then they're not accountable for any of the results that come from it. So they're getting people to invest in the smoke and mirrors. They're not accountable for results. And that is how you get that mismatched budget. When I was at SurveyMonkey, I revealed all the smoke and mirrors. I just said, hey, this is what we're going to spend. Can I please have another employee? And I got more employees. I got more budget. Unfortunately, I could have had as much of a budget as the pay team, which had a massive budget, but there's, as you know, there's not much to spend on SEO. I got a couple more employees. I got BrightEdge and Search Metrics. I got Ahrefs, I got SEMrush, right? But we're done, right? I got the content team had their own budget, but there's not much more you can directly spend. Obviously, I got allocations of resources from other teams, but they're like, I wanted more. Like, when you're an employee at a company, you kind of measure your self-worth by the budget you can command. So I got the max I could, but that was it. It wasn't that exciting. And that's where I think SEO fails. So when it comes to funding these budgets, they know that the ROI and the ROAS is not great, but it's very clear. If I give another dollar to paid, this is what I will get from it. If I give another dollar to SEO, I'm getting a long paragraph email about how there might be an algo update and that dollar might get lost, or it might turn into $50, but I'm not really sure. It depends. And then like, I'll just give it back to paid. And that is my biggest complaint with that. As far as the inflation part of this, it's an auction. So that's one of the things that I think a lot of companies like about paid is that it's just like AI. It self-improves. You put in what you want your ROAS to be. Maybe you get less users, maybe you get more, but you have a cap. And you don't have to overspend your budget, or you can overspend your budget because you're comfortable with it. But at least they know what they're doing and they're making those decisions. Again, the biggest problem with SEO is they're being asked for this outlay of money, being promised nothing in return. And when it doesn't work, and I see this so often, and most of my consulting leads are companies that have failed with multiple SEO agencies, where they're like, we tried it, we did the audit, we wrote all the content, nothing came of it. We fired the agency because we blamed the agency. We did it again with another agency. We had the audit, we wrote all the content, it failed again. They either decided that SEO doesn't work for them, it doesn't work at all, or they now want to try something else, which makes them more open to hearing me discuss strategy and product-led SEO and building something as an SEO channel. But again, I think that's the biggest issue, is the fact that what they're doing is they're dumping a bunch of money in without any sort of promise of outcomes, and then they miss it, and they don't know whether the people that didn't give them the outcomes are at fault, or the channel was at fault, or the industry was at fault, or their web pages were at fault. They just don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of things to dive into there. I think the obviously there's the kind of ineffectiveness piece, but I think the unwillingness of too many folks in the industry to be accountable for results is one of the things that really holds back. You mentioned being bad salespeople for the channel. That's definitely true. I think it's undersold by so many people, and you see the folks who are really, really good at it, and they elevate that conversation to a strategic level that it doesn't have in too many organizations. But I think right alongside that is the unwillingness to be accountable. And one of the things that I've been talking a lot about recently is the meaning of the word accountable. And this is a weird little geek out that has actually helped unlock the mindset for some of the folks that I've been speaking to, which is people think when they hear the word accountability, they think about consequences. Right? They think about somebody getting fired, or somebody getting a pay cut, or not getting a bonus, or whatever it might be. Like that's what accountability means to many folks. And I think it's really powerful to remember the etymology of accountability, which is literally giving an account, literally explaining. And all of those things that you mentioned about, there's an algorithm update, or this thing didn't work as well as we wanted it to, or whatever it might be, those are part of accountability. They are not a reason to be incapable of giving a forecast in the first place. And they happen to everything. They happen to paid channels. They happen to every single kind of, they happen to fulfillment. They happen to, they happen to finance, to accounting. There's always those events that come along that mean that you don't achieve the number that, you put down in your plan at the beginning of the quarter. And the accountability is explaining the deltas. The accountability is saying, well, we were up until this happened, and then this knocked us off track, and then we course corrected here, and we did this thing, and we got partway back on track, and we're still down 3%, whatever the number might be. And I think that is accountability, and it's easier actually to be accountable if you're prepared to have a thing from the outset that you're setting out to be accountable for. If you're building that forecast on real things, like you talked about, real activities, real predictions and beliefs about the outcomes of them. And it's one of the things that we actually see is it's quite easy actually to build an accountable experimentation program, because obviously we have the same goals, right? We have the same, ultimately we're trying to make the business money in the same way that any SEO team is trying to achieve business goals. But we have input metrics. We can talk about test cadence. Are we running enough tests? Did we run enough tests this quarter? Step one. What's our win rate? Were enough of our ideas good enough? Did we hit a kind of industry reasonable or above average, or based on our trailing 12 months, are we above our average win rate? Of those winners, are they big enough winners? Are we when we're hitting a good idea, is it turning out to return enough to the business? And those lead metrics build into an accountability program that is just, so much more powerful.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily the fault of everyone in the SEO world. For years, there was no accountability expected. Like the one place I think there's the weirdest place that people spend money. I just heard the number, but I don't want to misquote it. But it's like an insane amount of money that are spent on links in SEO. Like insane, like hundreds of millions of dollars spent on links.
Yep.
None of that is ever measurable unless like you're in a world where no one else has links and you get links. Like you're in like a personal injury attorney, like Tulsa, Oklahoma, and none of your competitors have links and you get links. And then you can be like, this is where I moved. But if you're in a world which is like, I don't know, if you're buying links for T-Mobile or Verizon, I'm sure they all buy links. So not to throw them under the bus, but like whoever it is, none of that is measurable. Like for companies that have like ads on TV and billboards, you can't measure anything. And they have these massive budgets and no one really says, well, what do I get if I spend $1 million in links? Because it's impossible. So like for years, we've never been expected to show any results. And the same for SEO. It's like, well, we do things that are like deliverable based, but they're not tied to any metric. So many SEO plans that I see that have been thrown away because now the companies are coming to me for asking for something different. They're like, well, we did 10 pieces of content per month. That was the deliverable. It wasn't 10 pieces of bottom of funnel content. It wasn't 10 pieces of top of funnel content. It was 120 pieces of content per year. And that was it. Not like, or they give keyword research. Like we're being paid to present to you 50 keyword ideas. What are these keyword ideas? Well, they satisfy it with just 50 keywords. So yes, we've never really been asked to be measured. And there's no like, so like the industry is used to just like turning work in without being graded.
Yeah, we see it on the side. There's something, the best teams love accountability, right? The best teams want to grade themselves. They want to compete. They want to achieve those results. And we see it with the list of ideas that comes back from, like you say, a bad agency ideation session or something, which looks like the output of an audit, only you know that each one of those ideas is going into a hypothesis queue, and somebody's going to have to build that and run that test. And you suddenly start looking a little bit more critically at like, is that really going to move the needle? Or the other thing then, and this is an embarrassing admission, I have admitted this before, it's not the first time, but I now remember deliverables from my agency days where we would recommend. I actually looked one up. This was old, like 2009 or something. And we did some keyword research, and we recommended that across some like scalable site section that this site incorporates keywords into their titles. That was the actual recommendation, and I'm like so super embarrassed about that now, because not only never setting aside the keyword element of it, just the fact of like, what do you mean? Like there is a million ways, like in fact an almost unlimited number of ways that you can incorporate this keyword into that title. And what we see now running these tests is it really matters, and that's not a surprise, because again, back to the paid search side, you think about the pre-PMAX era of paid search, where humans are writing those adverts, the AdWords copy by hand. That was people's job, and it was a very, very valuable job. And you could write ad copy that was like 10x better than somebody else's ad copy. So it is no wonder that those titles and those snippets really affect click-through rate. And in organic search, that has been massively underinvested, underutilized. And we obviously see that now running the kind of experiments that we get to run. And so I'm like, yeah, it's just embarrassing to say that its advice is, oh, you should put your keyword in your title.
Totally. And just to underscore this for Searchpilot, I think that when people think of the skill set of SEO, I find that it's two things. One, it's basically business development. So they're good at acquiring links, which is business development. And that's the skill set. And the other is technical SEO. And those are the two skill sets that I think, honestly, are the least valuable for SEO. I think the most valuable skills for SEO are really the soft skills, the being able to like sell SEO internally, because then you get stuff done, right? Or maybe it's hard skills if you're in a smaller company, you just do the work, right? Not if you know what you want to do and you get in and code the page, you can build the page and you're in WordPress or whatever it is that you have to do. The other soft skill that I think is really missing is user empathy. And the user empathy is how you're able to say, well, who is the user that's going to be doing this search? So how do I optimize the page for that user? And then you're improving the click-through rate. And I think those are the skills that people don't talk about enough. Again, they talk about like how smart they are with technical SEO experimentation and really understanding deep things around technical, or they talk about all the links they've acquired, which I think are business development skills. But the most successful SEO people I see are all soft skills, like the ability to understand users, ability to understand their counterparts, ability to understand employees or consulting clients. That's where I think you win a lot more.
For sure. And I think, I mean, it's an analogy with so much of life, I think, isn't it? It's like the hard skills sound hard, but the interpersonal stuff, sales skills, I mean, everything is sales, essentially, is kind of a big part of what it comes down to as well, isn't it? Like that skill alone is, I think, I haven't really thought about it this way. You just kind of unlocked me thinking about it. People are often asking, what should early career folks do to get ahead? And I think some exposure to sales is really, really powerful. Selling anything, something, doesn't have to be, a software product or SEO even. But just that concept of, there's so much in there. There's so much in the psychology, so much in the dusting yourself down and getting back up, so much in the getting no a million times, and as well as obviously figuring out what actually resonates with people, that empathy that you were talking about there.
Yeah, those were all my first jobs. Maybe that's how I ended up in it. I sold stocks on the phone and got hung up on. I worked in a boiler room. Yeah. I worked for, I didn't have enough money when I was in school, so I worked in a charity boiler room calling people to try to get them to donate money. Getting hung up on, it's forget trying to even close a deal. I was just trying not to get hung up on. And when I figured out how to not get hung up on, I already sold something in my mind. I kept someone on the phone long enough. For everyone that is younger, that is watching, listening to this, that used to be legal. And that was the way things were sold.
So my experience was actually more physically door to door. And that's, there's something so visceral about that experience of, shaking
slamming the door in your face. Get the hell out of here.
Exactly. The physicality of it as well. So, it's interesting. I'm just realizing I haven't tried to put that on my kids' roadmap, and maybe I should figure out how to do that. But we're coming up on time. This, as promised, been a wide-ranging kind of exploration. We didn't exactly plan where we were going to go in the conversation, but I found it fascinating. Hopefully, the folks listening have as well. I get a lot of value out of these chats with you, but the chats are only one part of it. So your writing has been excellent, and I've really enjoyed some of your recent articles. In fact, it was some of the writing around the way SEO is not dying in an age of AI that chimed with some of my thinking that led me to suggesting we get on this call. So if folks want more of that, where's the best place to find you?
So I regret never doing this before, but 2 years ago, I started a newsletter at productledseo.com. That's the whole brand. Everything's product-led SEO. And it's just my original thoughts. And the reason I never did newsletter before is I saw other newsletters and they were just curated, they're great newsletters out there, but they curated SEO ideas, and I wanted to write something original. So I just started writing, and then people were subscribing, and it gives me great ideas. Just from our conversation, I really want to write about this idea of SEO being pull, because if you think about SEO pulling ideas, it really will never die. We will always, again, I hope the robots aren't listening and take this away from us, but I think we'll always be able to make choices and be able to wake up and decide, today I'm going to skip work and I'm going to look for something else rather than have scripted life.
I hope so. Well, productledseo.com. Folks should check it out there. And you're pretty active on LinkedIn as well, so they can head on over there as well. From my side, you can find me. I'm Will Critchlow on all the social platforms, probably most active on Twitter and LinkedIn, and of course at searchpilot.com with our writing as well. So thank you for your time, everyone who's been listening. Eli, thank you for joining, and I hope everybody's got as much value out of this conversation as I have.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.